Right on cue, at the end of IAE 2954, Anvil Aerospace has thrown down the gauntlet by not only releasing the highly anticipated medical terrapin, but also given us one more thing, the Anvil Paladin gunship. While this does feel like just an Anvil reskin of the Redeemer, the component selection is actually pretty interesting, with a myriad of trade-offs. Oh, and 4 size 5 guns doesn't hurt either. Hello folks, Space Tech here, and welcome to a deep dive and buyer's guide for the Anvil Paladin. I'll be covering everything we know about the ship, as well as how it stacks up against the competition in the Aegis Redeemer. Of course, this ship is still in concept, so CIG can change things as it moves along the ship pipeline. So with quad size 5 guns, generous living quarters, and a silhouette and style of a Valkyrie, does the Paladin do enough to earn a spot in your hangar? If I helped answer that question by the end, a like and subscribe is always appreciated. As always, I've left timestamps in the description below, so feel free to jump around to sections that interest you the most. The Paladin comes in at 53 meters long, 38.5 meters wide, and 14.5 meters tall while it's landed. For some context, that's the same length as a Corsair with the width and height of a Valkyrie. Overall, this gives you a fairly large profile, especially from the top and bottom. For comparison's sake, the Redeemer is 13 meters thinner, while having a similar length and height. We'll dive deeper into the implications of this later. First, a tour. On the bottom floor, we have our access to the ship through a staircase on the left side. This does seem to be the only entrance, meaning you'll have to run through the entire length of the ship to get to the pilot seat from the ground if you have to leave in a hurry. I think that's completely reasonable for a ship of this size. Up the stairs, we have our FPS prep room. Here, we have 4 suit lockers on the far wall with a gun locker right beside it. While suit lockers don't provide a lot of value today, we now know that different suits of armor are going to have a variety of effects on your gameplay. For example, you're going to want to be in light to no armor when you're piloting the ship to maximize your maneuverability. The advantage of a suit locker is that you'll be able to quickly grab your heavy or EVA capable armor as you run out of the ship. That, combined with the gun rack, will make sure that you're ready for any FPS encounter extremely quickly. Going deeper into the ship, we find ourselves at the base of the stairs. We will likely have a few components in this center room, as well as access to a fire extinguisher for engineering. It does look like there is some space around this main area for a couple SCU of loose cargo as well, but it's worth noting here that the Paladin does not carry any cargo attached to a grid. This is something that we'll discuss again later. This brings us to the last room of the Paladin's lower floor. Here, we have a ladder that will take us to the cockpit, as well as 2 turret operator seats. I'm sure at some point you'll be able to control any of the turrets from any MFD, but for now, I wouldn't be surprised to see these 2 seats be the ones that control the smaller remote turrets on the side of the ship. An interesting design decision for this section of the ship is the transparent flooring on both floors. This means from any of the 4 seats, you should be able to look straight up or straight down to see what's above or below the ship at any point. This is going to increase your crew's overall situational awareness. Heading up the ladder from before, we are now in the actual pilot's and co-pilot's cockpit. I think this is where the default controls for the massive quad size 5 turret will be to begin with. Of course, we will likely also end up with our most important small components like life support and avionics here. A welcome feature on a ship with this much glass is the addition of a blast shield to cover up the cockpit. This comes right on the heels of the Anvil Carrack getting its own blast shields implemented in the PTU today. We've heard in the past that glass in the Star Citizen universe is extremely strong and should have the same strength as any part of the hull. With that in mind, I'm not quite sure what the eventual benefit of blast shields will be. We've seen them on a few ships like the small ones on the Cutter, the Carrack, and the Fury MX as well. There's a lot of different knobs CIG can turn here to make blast shields worth it, maybe even just resistance to solar flares or something. But until we learn more, I wouldn't be paying too much attention to it. Moving back from the cockpit, we have a shared bathroom that I can only assume will come with the signature shower-toilet combination. We have our stairs to the bottom floor, and finally, we have a little dining area. We don't see any kitchen facilities, which is a little odd for a ship with this much room, especially considering the recently released Intrepid had a food processor. That being said, it's possible that it is in the ship, it just isn't pictured here. Moving to the back, right, and left, we have our habitation rooms. These rooms seem to be mirrors of each other with a series of amenities. Each room comes equipped with 2 bunk beds, a desk, what looks like a sofa of some sort, and personal lockers for each crewmate to store their personal items. I will say, the habitation section seems large for this ship. If we consider the fact that there is 0 SCU of cargo, then the 2 large rooms seems to be quite excessive. That being said, I had thought the same thing about the Starlancer Max's 4 double beds, but many people seem to love it and the RP potential that the rooms provided. It's possible that CIG is trying to fulfill the same kind of desire here with the Paladin. This leads us to the final room in the back, engineering. So what components do we get in the Paladin, and how do they compare to the Redeemer? Powering everything, we get 2 medium power plants in the Paladin. This is the same as the Redeemer. While this might mean that energy weapons on the Paladin get bigger capacitors than if it only had a single power plant, it's not always the case. The biggest advantage of multiple power plants is the redundancy that this provides in a fight. When a ship loses its only power plant, it will be dead in the water. It will be unable to fire energy weapons, and most importantly, it will lose thrusters altogether, preventing you from being able to run away. The Paladin's engineer, on the other hand, should be able to turn off enough systems to give them the chance to limp away and live to fight another day. Moving on, both ships have a size 2 quantum drive, but differ greatly in their fuel capacity. The Paladin will come with one size 2 fuel tank and one size 2 quantum fuel tank. Compare this to the 2 of each in the Redeemer. This gives the Redeemer twice the quantum range without refueling. Of course, in Stanton this may not seem like a big deal, given the fact that all ships with a size 2 quantum drive can easily make multiple jumps across the system without refueling, but as we approach the release of larger systems like Pyro, that extra fuel can be extremely helpful. This advantage will be even more important in lawless systems, where there will be fewer fueling stations overall. The Paladin also comes with 2 size 2 coolers compared to 1 size 3 on the Redeemer. Other than that, the components are largely the same. 1 size 2 battery, life support, computer, and radar. We still have a lot to learn about how any of these components and systems are going to work at all, so I won't really speculate on their effectiveness here. This brings us to the components that matter most for a gunship: weapons and shields. The Paladin comes with a single size 3 shield, the very same that was replaced by 6 size 2 shields on the Redeemer in its recent rebalance. Comparing the shield HP pools, we can see that at the very top end, a size 3 shield can give you a shield HP pool of 60,000. Compare this to the Redeemer's maximum of around 32,000 shield HP, or just over half. In this respect, it's clear that the Paladin is a lot tougher, but I believe that it will also end up getting hit more often due to its much larger profile. The one upside to the Redeemer's size 2 shields is that they can actually be replaced by hand, unlike size 3 components. Maybe that's the reason that the Redeemer has 2 SCUs of cargo compared to the 0 on the Paladin. Another reference to the old Redeemer is in the Paladin's weaponry. The main weapon of the Paladin is a massive quad size 5 remote turret. This turret is also on rails, similar to the Scorpius. It means that the turret can be moved from the bottom of the ship to the top of the ship at will. This will largely be useful for ground assaults in atmosphere when you may need to lay down a lot of damage towards ground targets like tanks, turrets, or maybe even a massive sandworm. Compare this to the main weapons on the Redeemer, which consists of a pair of dual size 4s for a total of 2 size 4s on top and 2 size 4s on the bottom of the ship. While this should give you some more simultaneous coverage in a bubble around the Redeemer, the difference in DPS is really large, especially if it's against a single target. Considering the split weapons, the Redeemer pilot may not even be able to keep the target in the firing arc of both of its main turrets, a concern that isn't present on the single turret of the Paladin. When it comes to single target damage, there is no contest between the Paladin and the Redeemer. This brings us to the wing-mounted turrets. Each wing of the Paladin has a remote turret that has 2 size 4 weapons on it. While unclear at first, we now know that the pilot can use these weapons when the remote turret seats are not in use. This is massive. The ability for the pilot to take over the turrets make this ship far more friendly to running the Paladin with just 2 people instead of 4 to get the most out of it. While you would have better coverage with turret operators that could independently aim the turrets, ask yourself if you would rather have those same 2 people in another ship like a Hurricane or even another Paladin fighting beside you. It also means that owners of this ship aren't just helpless if they ever need to fly this ship solo. When compared with the pilot guns on the Redeemer, we go from the Paladin's 4 size 4 guns to just 2 size 4s, cutting the DPS in half. Now, it's worth noting that the Redeemer does come with 2 extra turrets that each have a pair of size 3 weapons, but those extra seats can be really hard to fill. As we can see, the weaponry of the Paladin simply outclasses what's available on the Redeemer. While there are more gunner seats in the Redeemer, I'm not sure when I would rather put 5 people in a Redeemer instead of splitting them across 2 Paladins instead, at least as far as combat is concerned. Now, it is likely that the Redeemer ends up more maneuverable than the Paladin, but the question will be whether or not it's enough to act as a balance for the extra damage and shielding of the Paladin. If not, the time to use the Redeemer will be for covering vast distances using its larger fuel tanks with a crew of at least 3. The Redeemer was also supposed to get modularity at some point, but it will probably be a very long time before we hear anything about it. So should you buy the Anvil Paladin? As it stands, I think it's a great ship for what it's trying to do. If you have 1 to 2 friends around and you want some multi-crew action, the Paladin is a perfectly reasonable choice. It's worth keeping in mind that it does have 0 SCU of cargo, so don't expect the same kind of versatility that you would get from a ship like the Starlancer TAC. I also don't expect this ship to be very maneuverable, as there has to be something to bring it in line with the Redeemer. The Paladin is currently priced at $300. Given the usual 10% increase when a ship goes flight ready would bring it to $330, the exact same price as a Redeemer. Personally, I would purchase a $10 upgrade from the Vanguard Harbinger to the Paladin. This is just to protect myself from future price increases. Then I would wait for the ship to actually release before applying that upgrade, so I know exactly what I'm getting. How do you think the Paladin stacks up against the Redeemer, and will you be picking one up? Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.